What is up, everybody? This is Joe Adams, and welcome to the Relentless Pursuit podcast. This podcast brings individuals from all different journeys, all different backgrounds to share their story, what they've been through, their experiences that led them to where they're at now. We touch on mental health and just a variety of things. We get a little crazy with it. And yeah, so it's a little bit everywhere, but the main purpose of this is sharing the journey. So if this is for you, check it out. If it's not, still check it out and subscribe and review and all those things and get us out there. So thanks. As always, we got my man Logan Hyder of Cinema 83 in the house.
What is up?
Doing what he does.
A little rainy morning.
This is podcast recording number 3 of 3 this week.
Yep.
So we've been getting after it, getting ahead. But today we got a very special guest and her friend over here. And flown all the way from Vegas to be on this podcast and share her story. Mrs. Brit Denardo.
Woohoo!
Hi.
Welcome. She's like, I didn't expect the applause. Welcome, Brit. How are you doing?
Good.
Good. Hell yeah. Well, like I said before, thank you so much for coming out here. Brit reached out to me a while back about the podcast. She's sharing her story. I'm not going to let you know what it's about yet, but, and she felt moved to reach out and just so she can get it out there. And so she took it upon herself to schedule a flight out here. And obviously they're making a weekend of Nashville, but get on the podcast and, shed some light on things that are happening in her life. So thank you so much for making this happen. It means the world to us. And I'm sure to a lot of people that you don't even know it's going to impact. So
Thanks for having me.
yeah, of course. So Brit came from Vegas. What we do here is we want the audience to get to know you a little bit more. So take us back, as far back as you want to go, where you're from, a little bit of your upbringing, so that way everybody can get the whole picture and, where you're at now.
So I was born and raised in Vegas.
Okay.
And I was raised by a single mother. I have a younger brother and sister, and I grew up in a crazy household. So I went straight to beauty school after high school. And I always said, when I'm 23, I'm going to be married. I'm going to have my career started, and I want to have a baby. And I literally had, all those things
happen. Yeah.
I dove straight into my career, hit the ground running, and I was, fully booked after a year and a half.
Nice.
Doing hair. So I have 3 babies, 14, 11, and 7, girl, boy, girl.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm super big into sports and making sure they do their extracurricular stuff.
Of course.
My husband was from New York, so there's it's my upbringing and his was so different. Yeah,
quite the contrast. I mean, I don't really I guess I couldn't really wrap my mind around what an upbringing in Vegas is.
I was just thinking the same
I'm just
thing.
Sin City. It's it's different than everywhere else in Nevada, I'd assume. But
yeah, I live off I think that people think of Vegas the Sin City, the strip,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But I live off the strip, so it's kind of the suburbs, I guess you could say, of Vegas. I never go to the strip.
yeah.
Hey, that's what
Hate it.
that's what I was saying about that show. There we go.
I've been out there a handful of times. Let's see. I went when I was in the military. I got back from deployment, and me and some buddies randomly went to this EDC thing out there. Y'all know what that is. And I was like, well, this is really cool, and I was raising all kinds of hell, just got back from the desert. It was wild as shit.
I live 5 minutes from EDC.
Yeah, really? I imagine it's a nightmare around that time. It was a lot of fun. I had a blast. And then I've been a couple other times. But yeah, the strip thing just, once you do it, you do it. I don't know how people go back constantly.
Right.
But,
I think you have to be into gambling and partying hard.
See, I'm not a gambler. I don't have the patience for it.
I gambled twice, and it was $20, and I was like, that's my Starbucks for a few days.
Hell yeah. Hey, I love me some Starbucks too.
Yeah.
So did you grow up in the suburbs of Las Vegas whenever you were growing up as well?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's still Vegas, but I never lived on the strip or near the strip. I lived all over Vegas. We moved so much when I was growing up. I went to a new school every year.
How come?
Really?
My mom, she just moved, up and moved. We lived from apartment to apartment. Until I was in high school. The longest time I went to a school was, I was 3 years at one high school. My senior year, we moved. She was married at this time. And we moved, and that was the longest time I was in a school was 3 years.
So is that like where you come to, like you said, it was crazy growing up?
Yeah.
Is that just because all the moving around, or?
My mom was an addict too. So she was crazy. She was a crazy mom.
Are y'all close now?
No. I love my mom, but she was 17 when she had me. So she didn't really like raise me my whole life. My grandma is like my lifesaver. Yeah. So when I think about like a mom, it's really her, you know?
Yeah. I've talked about this before, you know, I got an 8-month-old daughter, the greatest thing in the world. But, you know, 33 when we had her, right? And so I know who I am. And so I try to put myself in like younger people's shoes. My sister had my oldest niece at 18. And I'm just like, dude, you still like, it took me a long time to figure out who Joe is and like be firm in that. And then 18, you have no clue about really anything. Mm-hmm. And then you're trying to figure out who the hell you are, but also you got like a kid now. And that's just a wild world. I mean, I'll never experience that obviously, but just to imagine it's got to be pretty intense.
Yeah, I can't. I was 23 when I had my first one.
So a little bit more grown.
But still, I look back and I'm like, who's that child holding that baby?
Right.
Right.
So you said she was a single mother raising you though? So what was if you don't, I mean, you don't have to share.
No, you're fine. So my real dad was also an addict. My mom was not like super deep in addiction when I was younger, but she was like, I grew up in an abusive household.
Of course.
You know, and she was married quite a few times, tons of boyfriends and stuff. My real dad was in prison. I haven't even said that before. I didn't meet him until I was 16. Dang. So, and we talk here and there now. Like, he has a great heart. He's nice. But that's all it is.
Right.
You know, It's very surface. My mom's first husband, she was married to him when I was 9 months old.
Of course.
And so when I talk about my dad, I talk about him because even after they got divorced, he still took me on the weekends. He was like such a dad to me and like considers me his own daughter. He never had children of his own.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I think she was married 3 or 4 times.
Damn.
And how long was she with the man that you said you still consider your dad?
Until I was probably like 4.
That's pretty cool of him.
5.
I have some experience.
Great. He lives in
with
South Carolina now.
Choosing to do that is a different thing. You know, like it's a pretty cool thing. When
Yeah.
People step up like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially because like he never had any of his own. You know.
Yeah.
And for like a man that doesn't have children of his own, that can like step in and like love them.
Like they are his own.
Yeah. I feel like it's like we're motherly. Like we're like women, we are like made to have children. So I feel like it would seem like more natural for us to like welcome other people's babies. Mm-hmm. You don't hear that often with men.
No.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot of times it's the other way around.
I've thought about that, you know, like, you know, we had my daughter with my wife, but, you know, being a stepfather, like trying to like raise someone else's kid. So it's an interesting concept. I have nothing but respect for men that do that and like actually set the bar high. I mean, that's good shit.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
We were talking about this the other day, maybe yesterday, and I'm like, I have 3 kids. I would never want to date someone that had 3 kids. And my daughter's like, but you have 3 kids. And I'm like, exactly. Yeah. That's like the Brady Bunch. Like, you know, I mean, it's a huge role to step into, even with just one that's not yours. But I mean, it happens now more than ever. People have asked me behind the chair, like new clients, like, do you have the same dad for all 3 of your kids? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, that's so weird. I'm like, is it?
I wish it wasn't.
Like, you know
I really
what?
wish it wasn't.
Actually, in Vegas, I'm like, you're right. Like, it is not a common thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Seriously. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, that's weird. I'm like, what's so weird about it? And I'm like, actually, I don't really, there's majority of people get remarried and have another baby or whatever. Like, you know.
You know, it's interesting you say that because, you know, I never wanted that to be the circumstances, you know, and so like I didn't get married till just recently, and I've called off 2 engagements, you know, like when I was in the military, just a handful of years back, and like because I was like, dude, I really want it to be that person, and I want to be sure before I make that decision because I don't want to fall into that statistic, right? And so I was willing to just kind of suffer through things and call things off, and I got a lot of shit, but then it led me to Lydia, and I'm like, oh, this is what it was all about. But yeah, because it is too common nowadays. It's pretty heartbreaking, you know, that whole family structure that a lot of us value is a rare occurrence nowadays. So,
but on the flip side of that, a lot of people stay in really unhealthy relationships and marriages, and you know, we think that we're doing the right thing by keeping our families together, and all of it, your kids are exposed to things that they shouldn't be.
Yeah, you hear it for the kids.
Yes,
Do it for the kids.
Exactly. Do it for the kids. And I always say the kids notice, whether you think they do or not. They're going to feel that energy, and they're going to notice. They're going to. And when they get older, they'll put it together if they didn't notice then. They'll be like, wait, that was kind of weird.
They're smarter than we think that they are.
It's like you're talking about with the mirroring.
More than,
no doubt.
Like little ones, like when your daughter's like 2 or 3, like you say one thing and then you're like, oh my gosh, she was listening. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, they hear so much more than we think that they do.
No, I agree. I mean, it's pretty wild. And to add on to that, man, I had a freaking thought that was going to go well with that. But I'll come back around to it anyways. But it had something to do with my wife and that whole kind of mindset. Shit, man, I lost it.
Sorry about that.
It's okay, Logan. But
I do that all the time.
If it comes back, just jump back in.
Actually, it typically doesn't happen. I mean, I've been pretty smooth with things, but no. So what I gathered, though, and I really appreciate about you is, you know, because at the beginning you said how involved you are with your children. And so given the circumstances that we'll get to, you seem to put everything into them. And, you know, you talked about your family and your upbringing. Like, you didn't allow that to have any influence except for a positive influence on how you raise your kids.
Right.
You know?
I took every single thing that happened to me, and I always, like, my childhood was everything I never wanted to be, like my mom, or moving all the time. Mm-hmm. Like, I really wanted stability.
Yeah.
Because I never had that.
Of course.
And so that was super important for me to give that to them. But, like, once we get into the story, like, you know, I made mistakes too. None of us are perfect. And my kids seen a lot of things that they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And they've been through a lot. But, like, I'm on my 3rd kid, and I'm still like, what am I doing sometimes? You know what I mean? Like, actually, by the 3rd one, I was more nervous than the first one, because then I'm like, now I know how I can mess things up or do things right. And then it's...
Yeah. You learn a lot along the way. Mm-hmm. I mean, but like you said, you were young, and then you've had like pretty crazy circumstances. So you're going to make mistakes. I feel like I'm always making mistakes. I'm like, damn it, Joe. You know, you can be hard on yourself, but that's the point too, is you can always improve. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't have to be subject to anything that you've done in the past. You can be like, no, I'm no longer that person anymore. And you can improve yourself and be better. So
like, my brother and sister went the opposite way from me. Yeah. They got into drugs and had my brother got into a lot of trouble and out of jail. I was the only one that never got into any of that.
So you never struggled with anything like that?
So I was going to ask you about you moving around a lot in school. Like, was that difficult? Like, going from school to school and that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. Because I didn't realize back then, like, what anxiety was. Mm-hmm. But looking back, like, I had a really hard time. Like, I'm not one to just go up to people like, oh, hi, I'm Brittany. Nice to meet you. Like, I will sit in the back of the room and observe. And, like, if someone talks to me, then, you know, so it was always hard because I never had the same group of friends in one school. Like, I'm grateful. I have friends that I took through my life. Like, my best friend that I've had the longest has now been for 32 years. I was 5 years old when I met her. So I had my friends that I kept, but I never had, like, that group of friends at school because we moved all the time, you know, and we lived in bad neighborhoods. Like, I got picked on. I was little, and I I mean, I'm tiny but mighty is like what I always say because of like where I lived and, you know, having to go to schools that weren't in good areas.
So it's just a constant readjustment.
Always.
Yeah.
Sounds like chaos, constant chaos. Too.
Constant.
Yeah.
But, you know, you've learned from it. That's
have.
That's the important point. Yeah. And back to the hair thing. So when you were in high school, did you know like I want to do hair one day?
Yeah. I started cutting my friend's hair in my backyard with like kitchen scissors in 6th grade. I'll never forget the first time my friend's like, I want bangs. I was like, oh yeah, let's do this. Horrible idea.
Whoops.
Yeah. And then I started doing like being a model for hair shows in high school. And my best friend and I. And that's when I started like foiling and coloring and doing color on all my girlfriends in school.
Oh yeah.
Before I even went to beauty school, I was already like doing it on all my girlfriends.
So you knew that was the path. You were like, I'm gonna crush this shit.
I mean, like wanted it so bad.
And she's got great looking hair. I mean, you do her hair, right? So like, hell yeah. I mean, you know what you're doing. You're like a master.
We got the artwork in the
I'm
room.
a big hair guy too.
Yeah, we got the artwork right in front of us.
Yeah, I love. I like instant gratification, so I love like blondes and extensions. I do everything, but that's my favorite. It's like my.
Do you think you like kind of making some order out of that chaos, right? A lot of chaos going on in your life, and then you could take something that's kind of chaotic, somebody's hair, and bring it into order.
I never thought about it like that. Yeah. Yep. Because let me tell you, some of these girls come into their hair, it's crazy.
Or I guess let me ask you.
So good afterwards. That's a really good. I never thought about it like that.
Well, what was your thought about why that appealed to you so much, though, doing that?
I really just loved the beauty industry. Like I just always loved like hair and makeup, and I didn't want to work for someone. I wanted to have like freedom. For that when I was a mom, I could make my own schedule. Like my mom was a blackjack and like baccarat dealer in the casino business. Like you never get holidays. It's, 12 to 8 every day. Can't take your kids to sports. Like if I had a job like that, there's no way my kids could do what they do. There's no way. So
it's crazy you were thinking about that way before you had them, though. Like this
my
career
mom
will
was
give me an
never at
opportunity.
anything.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that I could be because I always knew I wanted to be a mom. So my thing was career. I got pregnant when I was planning my wedding. So I was like, I'm not going to be 7 months pregnant walking down the aisle. Absolutely not. So we just went to the courthouse on my birthday, actually, like 22 days before I had Izzy. And then we had our wedding later on. But yeah, I always knew I wanted to be a mom, and like I wanted freedom. I wanted to make good money. Hairdressers can do so well.
Oh, hair culture. I was going to say that hair culture is huge now. I mean, so you're in a good business. I mean, because I go to the barbershop every week. I partnered with a barbershop a few years back up in Mount Juliet, and awesome decision there. But like my barber, I mean, he does jelly rolls whole crew. So like jelly roll will fly him to like wherever they're at, and like keep him there.
I think the barber was backstage like cleaning him up.
Yeah, that was definitely him. He's like his personal barber, and so like, I mean, gets a lot of success from it. I'm like, damn, who would have thought? Like me, I didn't know. I was like, damn, I didn't. Hair. Barbers
kill it.
Oh, they
they're
do.
Quick. And you guys are so loyal to your barbers. My son, he's been going to the same barber for years.
Yeah.
And then he likes to go once a week. Well, now he's into this froey whatever. So he like blow dries his hair and stuff. But before he would go get every week, my husband and him would go get a fade.
Yeah.
And now my father-in-law takes him. So he's like I'm like, come on, we gotta just see the other barber. He's like, no, my barber makes me look good.
Yeah, I was gonna say once you get the good cut once, you're like, whatever, let's just keep going there.
It's like when you find your tattoo artist.
Yeah.
And if you go to another barber, you feel like you're doing something like
cheating on you.
It's like infidelity. You're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like you're thinking about it at night. I'm like, oh God. Yeah, I couldn't do it.
So you said you were big into sports too. Did you play sports in high school or anything? I know you were moving around a lot, so it made that difficult.
I'm not a huge sports person myself. Like I did dance and cheer, more dance. I tried to play soccer, wasn't my thing, but I'm big into the sports for the kids because I feel like kids that don't have things to do get into trouble. Majority, just from my experience growing up. Like, even though I never got into any trouble, like I did do sports never like my kids. Like my kids are in competitive sports. I'm like a go big or go home person. Like we're not doing rec sports. Like you're going to do this and that's it. Like if we're going to invest money into this, like I want you to be good at it and love it. So that's why with the sports thing, it's more for the kids. My daughter was a competitive dancer for 9 years. And then when everything happened, she dove in right away. Like we were talking about this last night, Caitlin and I. She was like in denial almost of everything. So she went right back to dance, went on with her life. Like I'm fine.
Yeah.
And then a few months after, she was like, I can't do this anymore. It was too much pressure.
And so she hasn't done dance since then? No.
No, I pulled her mid-season, which was really hard. You know, dance is super expensive, and I felt like I didn't want to. She's so talented, like so good.
Yeah.
And she loved it, and she just has this amazing stage presence. But there was a moment I was like, I have to listen to her.
It shut her down a little bit.
Yeah, so she stopped. I gave her a break. She was playing soccer at school. And now she's doing cheer. Like she just got back into, it's a competitive team. We haven't actually started a competition yet with her, but we were dancing 5-6 days a week till 9:30 every single night.
Yeah.
Like it was a lot. And then my little one started doing it too. She was only going like 3 days a week. And then I have my son who plays club ball and Little League. So we had a sport 6 days a week.
Nonstop.
That's a lot, yeah.
But I mean, that's good. You're keeping them involved. And, you know, I'll talk about this. I did some competitive cheer stuff. I know about that. It's actually, yeah. I was a UCA instructor, actually. I was
Really?
I always
so strange.
And people are like, what the hell, really?
Yeah.
But, and so, but competitive cheer, takes a lot of skill. I mean, it's a whole nother level. So, hey, as long as she's fulfilled there.
Yeah.
But, you know, you talked about the situation. And so how about we bridge to that? So you met your ex, you were younger, and you were planning the wedding and all this. You said they were from New York. So do you want to take us back to like that timeline right there?
So I met my husband in high school and we dated a little bit and then kind of just like bridged off. And then we got back together. And then, let's see. So he came to Vegas when I think he was like about 11.
Okay.
So it's crazy that he still had like a New York accent and stuff as an adult because he was young when he got here. I met him and then he struggled with addiction and he got sober and he was sober for quite a few years. We were engaged really soon. I would say we were together for like 17 years almost before he passed away.
It's quite some time.
Yeah. So like I was like a kid.
Yeah.
So like when we were talking earlier, like trying to figure out who you are, like when you're young, I am trying to figure out who I am in my late 30s now because all I knew was my life as Frank's wife. Like we grew up together. We built our careers together. We started with nothing and then we both made great money together, you know? So we were kids.
Of course.
Yeah.
And y'all, because y'all met early on and you said you got married, what, like 23 you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you found out you were pregnant?
So we were planning our wedding.
Oh, okay.
And then I got pregnant. And I was like, my dress is a size 0. There's like no way. I don't want to be pregnant at the wedding. So we put that off. And then it was like before. So she was due on New Year's Eve in December. And then I was like, my mom's a little crazy and my family. And like if something were to happen to me and we're not married, then it's like the hospital stuff, like there could be like custody stuff. Like I just felt like I needed to make sure that was going to be good.
Yeah.
So, and then we just went and eloped.
So where was your career at kind of at this point when you guys were, because you said you met in high school, but when did you start dating? You said you got engaged quick.
Yeah. So I was 19 when we got engaged. I think it was 19.
So were you in beauty school or had you already started?
I was in beauty school.
Okay.
Yeah. I graduated beauty school. So by the time we got pregnant, like I was already doing hair for a few years. I was doing great. And he was in paramedic school and firefighting stuff, like to go be a firefighter.
Okay.
And then it was just a lot of work, like when we had her to finish. And so he stopped. And he was a server for a long time, like
Okay.
in the, like at Lavo and Tao and stuff.
Okay.
I spent a lot of time serving tables, not a towel, but
Yeah, and then a couple other places, and then later on, he got a job at UPS, and then he was with UPS for like 10 years.
Okay. With the with the addiction thing, was that like you said he struggled with it early on? Was this all through those 17 years off and on?
Yes. So even though I grew up like in a house with like addicts, I didn't know that people did pills to get high.
so that's what I was going to ask you. Like, what when you say that, like, if you don't mind sharing, like,
No, that's fine.
what were the issues that were like substances that they were struggling with? Was it alcohol?
Like my mom?
Yeah,
So my mom, full-blown alcoholic.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And my dad, my birth father, he was into like heroin and meth. So, but I didn't grow up with that, with him doing that. My mom's addiction got worse as I got older. But, I mean, I'm pretty sure she did other things, but like the most like visible thing was alcohol.
Okay.
When he was struggling early on too, was the same thing? Or
So for my husband, he had injuries when he was younger, and they gave him Oxycontin.
I know somebody who has that
Killer.
That exact same sort of, like
And-
beginning to the story.
Literally, he's not even 20 years old.
Are you ready to harness your ancestral power? Are you ready to embrace the knowledge of the runes? Look no further. Check out at Desert Rose Arts on Instagram. My friend Danny, she makes these wonderful malas, custom handmade pieces, charges them with a lot of intention, and she's a small business, so you can show her support by going and checking out her site, seeing what she's got available, the variety, and use code RP15 at checkout for a small discount.
Just follow me on Instagram. It's at BRIIT2_.
Check her out. I think last
Pill.
you mentioned,
Yeah,
you didn't
pills.
really know people like took pills to get high.
Yeah. So that was like his thing. So I didn't know that anything about it. I just was like, why are you acting different? And so I thought when people were like addicted to things, it was like meth, heroin, alcohol. But that's kind of when I realized people took pills to get high.
Yeah. I mean, and to, talk about that, how old did you say you were now?
I'm 37.
Okay. Yeah, so back in like around 2008, I graduated high school. Didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life after that. Ended up going to a private college in North Carolina, and I don't know. I started smoking weed. Like when I dabbled with weed on and off through high school. I was an athlete, smoked some weed here and there, drank all the typical things, and then I used to go to this dealer's house, and then I got introduced to Xanax. And I tell you what, it's crazy how things kind of just spiral. Because I take one here and there. Next thing you know, I mean, it was Xanax or Klonopin or something. I'd be snorting like 8 pills at a time, doing whatever I could. And then, if it was to the point where I'm scrounging for change, just to be like, man, I got to get some pills. Next thing you know, this is every single day, and I think I was trying to run away from like pressure of like wanting to succeed and make my family proud, but like I didn't know what I was going to do. So if I was on all these pills and shit, like I could ignore that, that kind of pressure and anxiety I had to do well. Well, when I take all that shit, it's like, you don't even think about those things, you're blacked out pretty much. And, but fast forward, that was like a whole year. And fast forward, I talk about, this self-hate, self-love scenario. And then, it was at the very end of my last semester, and I was like in the dorm bathroom, and I was looking at myself, and I looked like shit. It was all soft and just gross looking. And I just told that person, I was like, I hate you. I looked in the mirror. I said, I hate you. And I just left that person there. And I went and enlisted in the military. And I think that self-hatred was like truly self-love, because I love myself enough to walk away from the person that was there and left them behind. And, you know, and we can talk more about this, but at the end of the day, it's like we all had the capability of making that conscious decision to leave that person behind. It takes a lot sometimes, and it's really hard, and everybody varies, but if you're willing to and you're committed, you can make it happen, you know? So I don't know. That's just like my personal experience with pills, because like it was pretty rough. And then people I know that I used to screw around with back then, like are still in that same boat, you know, from my old town. I'm like, fuck, man. And it's heartbreaking too. So
It is. It's so heartbreaking.
yeah. So that's my little experience with that. But, and I wanted to bring this up too, since I'm on that with addiction. There's a lot of people that are addicts in some form. We're all addicted. You could be addicted to video games, gambling, watching sports, drugs, you name it, right? And I think it all comes down to basically harnessing that and not trying to not be an addict, but knowing where to charge that addiction. Where are you channeling that towards? Like now I think about my life, like I'm addicted to progress. I'm addicted to getting up and coming to work and training and taking care of my wife and daughter. I'm addicted to those things, but that's all positive. That's all beautiful. And so we have the ability to also channel that in the right direction. And you just got to like search for that. So hopefully that'll get somebody, but
That's a really good way to word that, actually. My sister was the same. She was an addict for a long time. She's 29, I think. And one day she got into some trouble and she just walked out and
clicked.
That was it. And she's just got her 3rd year, and she's thriving, and she's doing so good, and she's beautiful, and she looks great and healthy, and she's in nursing school. And she was addicted to heroin. She was in the dumps of her addiction. And I'm so proud of her. And like, it feels good because I finally have my sister back. She's actually my stepsister. But my mom and her dad were together since she was like 3 or 4. So she was like my baby.
Yeah.
You know, and then my brother is my brother and I are the only ones from my mom.
Okay.
And then we have different dads. And my brother, I mean, the poor guy like was set up for failure.
Yeah.
Because even though we both grew up in the same house, like they were younger when it got worse.
Yeah.
And I was older as well. So it affected them so differently. But he has a lot of mental health issues, which I do think, obviously from trauma.
Of course.
Growing up. And from doing drugs for so long. Like he started doing heroin at 12.
Jesus.
And at this time in our life, my mom was married, and from the outside, like it looked like we had everything. My stepdad was like a casino manager, and my mom was a dealer, and we went on vacations, and we had a big house and nice cars, and we lived in a really good area, like a nice gated community right across from the high school. And he got involved so young.
Yeah, imagine, like, you got to imagine what that does to your development at that age.
So I
There's
feel like
so much
his-
happening already.
Oh my
Like
gosh.
his brain just never fully like,
Couldn't have, yeah.
no.
Well, and your sister should be very proud too, because from what I understand, heroin is like is one of the ones that like 99% of people don't get off of.
Yeah.
So she should be pretty proud of that. But
She's so proud of herself.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well,
tell,
I don't know her, but hey, congrats to you. Keep
100%.
going. Keep moving forward. You're crushing it.
100%.
I love it.
She has an incredible story. I always tell her, like, you should start sharing your story. Like, you could really save someone and help someone. And she's, I feel like she's almost there. She works at a treatment center.
Okay. So she's
And-
committed a lot to helping.
And so she said that she's going to go to nursing school so that she goes, I'm either going to go to detox or Botox. Like, I don't know what kind of nurse I want to be.
that's funny.
I'm like, can you do Botox, please?
So
Just do both.
speaking about sharing stories to help others, tell us about your husband.
What part?
When we were at you getting married, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and the progression there, and like the progression with like, you know, the addiction aspect of things.
So he so his dad and mom got divorced when he was younger, like I don't know, maybe 11 or 12 or 10. And so his dad raised him and his sister for the most part. His mom was a great mom up until then, is what I was told. And so his dad was like his best friend. Like he was such a good dad. And so it was really hard, I think, that Frank started going off that. But Frank's dad always picked him up to get him back on track, sent him to rehab when we were like maybe 20, 21. I think it was 20 or 21. And he went in Laguna Beach and he was there, did the 3 months, and then decided like he wasn't ready to come back to Vegas. So I still lived in Vegas and I drove out there every weekend. And then he ended up working there and he became like a house manager. So he lived there still and then ran a house and like all the people that would come into the rehab.
Okay.
He was sober, doing great. That's when we were planning the wedding after he came back to Vegas after a year. He had, I think, like maybe 2 relapses in that time. He was sober my whole pregnancy. I want to say so when he got into Lavo, it's like a really nice restaurant, but it's like a very clubby scene too. And then they had the club upstairs. He got back into it slowly. And then before we knew it, I was pregnant with my son. And he was like really struggling. So he started going back to classes and therapy and stuff. The thing about Frank was like every time he messed up, like he always tried to get sober. So, he was doing okay. And then he was he hurt his back and then got that fixed. And then he was sober again and then had a motorcycle accident, shattered his collarbone, broke all of his ribs on one side in multiple places, and drove his bike home like that. Comes home, and I don't even ask if he's okay. I'm so pissed. I didn't want the motorcycle. He brought it home without even, he's like, look at my bike. I'm like, what? So I was like,
his arms like hanging off.
Literally like, get in the car. Like we're going to the hospital. We go to the hospital. I'm like, he's in recovery. He's been sober for this long. He cannot have opiates, period. So they give him Benadryl and something non-narcotic, right?
Yeah.
And they do like all the tests and they're like, we have to give him morphine. Like he could, like his body was like going into shock. Like he could have had like, I don't know, a heart attack or stroke or something, they said. And so I was like, well, there it goes. There goes your sobriety.
Damn, you just knew.
And I was so pissed and I was so scared for him and for me and my kids. And by this time I had my 3rd kid. So that was really when it got bad again. The longest he was sober was like 6 years, I think.
And that was probably
When I had
right
Izzy.
before that wreck? Is that the 6 year?
That was actually it was 5 years. So it was 5 years. It was like the longest. And that was before I had Izzy and after.
Okay.
And when I was pregnant with my son was when he started messing up again.
So I'd imagine when he was sober, he was pretty excellent, correct?
Right.
Mentally and just as a husband and father and whatnot. But then, because I'm wondering, I guess when this started, what made you stay in the first place? Did you just believe he could overcome it? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I always had hope because he always would get better. I really struggled with being codependent because of how I was like brought up.
Yeah.
Back then I had no idea what that was.
Yeah.
So I was super codependent on him. And
Will you explain for people that don't know what that means?
it's almost like you're addicted to a person. Like I felt like I could not live without him. It was so unhealthy. You don't have boundaries. You don't love yourself. You're so focused on, like, I was so focused on him that I had a moment where I was in the mirror and I was like, look, what the fuck? I'm like 100 pounds. I look sick. I'm not on drugs, but I look like shit because I'm spiraling in a different way. So I was so codependent on him. I could not live without him. And when he was sober, he was for the most part, great. Like every relationship and people have their shit, right?
Of course.
But I've done a lot of therapy over the last year and a half with codependency because I did not want to be codependent in my next relationship.
Yeah.
And I have boundaries. Like I love myself. Like all those things go away when you're extremely codependent on someone else because you're just leaning into them to find your happiness. So when they're not happy and their life's a shithole, like you're miserable. I depended on him for like to be happy. So like if he was falling, like I fell, but I was falling in a different way. You know, like
a lot of your value was coming from him.
Like I always needed to feel validated by him. And like I don't need that at all now. Like of course it's nice when people like you want to be validated by your partners and you want to be heard and seen and stuff. But like mine was like an unhealthy thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I went to him to like feel like I was enough because I needed to feel that thing on my own and I didn't because I relied on him for that.
Yeah, and I imagine like obviously who you were then and who you are today is a night and day difference.
So different.
I'm curious, you know, your thoughts, I guess, maybe looking back on that time, you know, knowing who you are now, would you have done things a little bit differently or what?
Yes. I wish I had loved myself back then. I think I stayed too because I wanted my family. I wanted to give my kids. I wanted to have a husband. I never wanted to give up. I felt like I wanted him to know that he was so valuable.
Sorry. Good. You're good. Feel free to take a moment.
Yeah, take your time.
A moment.
You're good.
Because like growing up, like I never got that. And so like I was telling Caitlin last night, like I constantly say like I love you to my friends. Like you could just be my client. I'm like, I love you so much. Like you are so great. Like you make a difference. Like I constantly tell people those things because I never heard it. And I think that was a big thing of why I like tolerated so much with him. Because he didn't see like his value and like what he really was, which is why he like escaped to drugs a lot too.
I was about to say, was that kind of his motivator, like a trigger point for him?
Yeah. And so, you know, looking back, like, would I change anything? I wish I could have fought harder for him and been a better support of like me going to like Al-Anon so I could figure out how to deal with him, but I never did.
Yeah.
You know, would I change it because I have my 3 beautiful babies. So it's like I would go through all that hell to have them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's such a hard question. Like,
yeah,
I would tell my younger self, like, run like the fucking wind. Don't look back because that was a lot for us to go through and for me and my kids and our family. But I loved him so much. And I got 3 babies and we did have a lot of really good times. Like,
of course. And then you look at all the, regardless of the circumstances, but like, look at all you have now. Like you have your beautiful children and you have the mindset you do now and you're able to share that. Right. And regardless of whenever it happened, you're able to use it now in order to like fuel you with purpose in a way.
yeah.
You know, that whole experience, you know, adversity is an opportunity, you know, now to you rather than something that was in the way. So
Right.
you totally re-geared your mind.
Would you say that it's difficult too in those situations? I was telling you about my stepdad earlier, and it was kind of the same thing. When he was on, he was great, real charming guy, very like literally the smartest person I've ever met in my life. But when he wasn't, he was a demon. Mm-hmm. And not speaking for your husband, but that's how he was.
Right.
But do you think, or I guess could you describe kind of the difficulty of like, whenever you're talking about staying, right? It's like it's not like it's miserable all the time. You know, he's done so, and when he's not that way, he's not that way. He's like a different person.
Right.
So like that can be really difficult because you're thinking, well, if he could just stay
You're always
like that,
like reaching for that.
right? So I think that's kind of a point that maybe people miss in that scenario. It's like, well, he's a drug addict and he's doing all this shit. Why are you staying with? It's like, yeah, but you don't see him when he's not, and so that's really difficult because you think in your mind about that version of him, even when that version is right in front of your face, you're still thinking about the better version. So can you kind of elaborate on that, I guess, a little bit?
My friend once told me, you get full on breadcrumbs. I was like, damn.
You get full on breadcrumbs?
Yeah.
Because when you're with someone that has a problem as hard as he struggled, in those like moments where he was like deep in his addiction, it was bad so much, like often, all the time. And then you like get sober and you sprinkle a little bit and you're like,
I know exactly. Yep.
oh my
So
gosh,
you're
like I
collecting
have my
those.
person back.
Yes.
And then boom, all over again. So she literally was like, you get full on breadcrumbs. And I was like, damn, that's harsh, but that's like legit the best way that someone ever put that to me.
That's an awesome analogy.
It really is.
Yeah.
No, it really is. If you're, I mean, I think about in those scenarios like a really dry desert, like just cracking and stuff, and you just put a drop of water on it, and it's like, you know, a godsend. But I don't want to get too far off on this, but my dad has a friend whose wife has cancer. Long story short, she's not a super nice person anyways. That particular situation didn't make it necessarily better. Of course, I feel for her situation, but my dad's friend really struggles with the way that she handles him, considering all the stuff he does for her and stuff. And I was having this conversation with him a few months ago, and he said something about how she said to him, he said, dude, some of the stuff she said to me, he said, I'd send you to the hospital if you said to me, but of course I'm not going to do that. It's my wife. But she said something to him like, I don't know what I would do without you. And that was it, right? And he was almost emotional about her saying that. And I straight up asked him, I was like, does that, like, obviously the cancer, it's a very sticky situation, but I was like, does that one statement make up for how powerfully you seemed like you were hurt by the other stuff? But it's exactly what you're saying. Whenever you don't have, when you're so dehydrated, they give you just a little drop of water and you're like, oh, okay. So, and he said, that confirmed to me that it was the sickness, not her. And I'm like, but that's kind of a sad spot to be in, where like something that small you're like convince you that all the other stuff isn't real almost. So that's
another one. You're so dehydrated, you get a drop of water.
Yeah. And then you feel like, and then there's the guilt aspect. Because, you know, if you do what's best for you, you feel like you're bailing on them.
Right.
You know, and then you feel selfish and guilty for like, oh, well, I'll let this person behind. What if they spiral out of control and they don't have me there? And then it gets worse. But, you know, and that's
just one of the worst positions to put somebody in that you love, by the way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And guilt hits in a lot of different ways. I mean, I had my accident, you know, and if I'm not living up to par, I get survivor's guilt bad. I'm like, why am I still alive? Like other people haven't survived these things, you know, and it's like, it can get you in so many different forms. So, and you seem like you were just so caring and loving and you wanted him to be his best that, you know, thinking of leaving him or whatever the case is would have been just way even worse.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely was mean a lot too, because I just got so fucking sick of it. So I'm not perfect. I'm no saint, you know. And like I said before, like when you're with an addict, like you get sick too, just sober and different. And was like diagnosed with PTSD. Like I have severe anxiety, like where I will vomit and faint. Yeah. I haven't had like those crazy episodes since I have done like therapy and stuff. I mean, sometimes I get really anxious and I feel like I'm going to pass out, and I can like catch myself to like, you know, take my brain in a different way. But no, like it's horrible. And so when he got sober, I would get so excited and life is great. And then you come home one day and you're like, what the fuck?
It's like a different person in your house.
Like, and that's the thing too. Like, there's such a fine line between like love and hate. Like, I love him so much, but I hated so much what he would do to himself and his family. Consciously, he would have never done that. Like, he would not treat us like that if he was in his conscious mind. Yeah. But he's, you know, messing up and doing things to escape his mind. So so much trauma comes with being with someone that has that. Yeah,
without a doubt. And, you know, and I like how you stated that, though. Like, then his intention wasn't to be addicted and, like, do that to his family. I don't think any addict's intention is to be an addict, you know? But, like, when people make statements like, oh, they're just a freaking addict, I'm like, that's actually, like, it's not something just to disregard. You know, I talked about being able to make a choice, but it just gets harder to make that choice to change your life. I got fortunate at, you know, a pretty early stage, but like you also feel for these people because that's a really hard thing to deal with, you know, and it takes a lot of effort. I mean, it is a disease, like they say, you know, and to get rid of it. And so you think about all those aspects of it too.
Well, the addiction too, but like what's going on in their mind that they need to do that.
Yeah, like I think it all comes from childhood trauma, which he had a great like upbringing. I think his parents' divorce was a huge thing for him. His mom's non-existent in our life. She didn't even come to his funeral. I mean, that's a whole nother thing.
And you said she was a good mother before that?
She was until they got divorced, is what he used to say. Like, they had a very, like, they are very traditional Italians. Like, my father-in-law worked like crazy. They had a great life. Like, I always used to tell Frank, if you can be half the dad that your dad is, like, we'll be great.
That's what I say all the time. If I could be half the dad my dad is.
And I said that I'll send it to you, the speech that I did at his funeral. Like, I was so proud of myself. Like, I forgot, like, I used to write a lot when I was younger. I journaled and I did poetry and stuff because I would write. I mean, I went through so much. Like, that's where I put my sadness. And I hadn't done that in years. And then when they're like, do you want to speak at his funeral? And I was like, yeah. And I had like a week or whatever. And I kept like going to the paper and I'm like literally writing like my goodbye. And I could not write it. And the day before the funeral, I wrote like the most beautiful, like 4.5 minute speech. It might have been shorter if I could like get through it like a normal reading maybe, but and then I remembered like after, now looking back, I'm like, wow, like I did such a good job. Like I was able to like put my words perfectly for him. And but yeah, he had a really good childhood. And I think that, you know, his mom leaving was, if not the huge part of his issues.
There's such a thing, I think, as having your innocence broken. You know, your world shattered is how some people put it. But I've definitely...
You say a lot of really good things that are like, like, I'm never going to forget. Like, the way you word things, those are like, you know, like the poetry thing and what you just said right now.
He's our poet here.
But I mean, I've been through a situation like that before. And whenever they said that, like, it shatters your world, it's like ringing in your ears, numb, sitting still for hours, not even, the time just takes by. Like, it's like, that's the only way that I know how to describe it. It's like it's like you were in this world one day and now you're just not anymore. And like in his mind, it's like, love is great, marriage is great, my parents, and now it's like, my mom is great. And now one day,
like, what happened?
Now one day it's like, how could my parents, I have divorced parents as well. How could they, there's two of my favorite people in the whole world. How could they not love each other? And by the way, I thought she was X, Y, and Z, and now she's not even in my life. Like, that'll break a man's mind for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I think that was
the catalyst, for sure. Well,
but his dad is like, even though he didn't have his mom the way that he did before, like his dad made up for that and then some. Yeah. Like, I used to tell Frank, like, I don't have like a good support system when it comes to like my immediate mom and dad. Like, it was me. And so my mom used to always just say, figure it out. That was like her saying. And, you know, I always used to tell him, like, you're so lucky that you have the dad that you have. You know, I tried to encourage him to have a relationship with his mom. And he did off and on, you know, but she was just selfish and all about her and married multiple times and did crazy shit. And, you know, but she was good to my kids. You know, she was close to my oldest. He allowed that. You know, I would take the kids over and he would go sometimes. And then finally he was like, her last marriage, she was a barber, right? And she was cutting his hair and her friend came up and said, like, what time's the wedding tomorrow? And she's like, oh, and he's like, what the fuck? You're getting married tomorrow?
Like, he didn't even know. Yeah.
And that was it for him.
Are you still close with his dad?
Yeah.
I assumed. But
His dad, we have our struggles, you know. Like here's the thing. He's more my dad than he is my father-in-law. So he treats me like a daughter. He's good to me. I think it's really hard for him. He was Frank's best man in our wedding.
do you think it reminds him of?
And so his pain is really hard to see. Okay, so he went to rehab. He's doing great. He had to have a double spinal fusion surgery. Mm-hmm. And this was Mother's Day. And he was home and he like had a walker. He'd been sleeping downstairs. I was sleeping with him downstairs for up until the night that he passed away. I did not. But I was helping him up and down. He got to a point where like I was managing his pain meds. They gave him like Percocets and he was doing great. Like I had not seen him high because his pain was so bad. Like it was just managing his pain. He wanted sobriety so bad. And so a Friday after the surgery, I think he passed away. It was like 11 days after or something. I was at home upstairs and I came downstairs and I was like, where's Daddy? I'm like, oh, he's outside. His friend just came by. And I go outside and I'm like, fuck. I'm like, it's you. And this is friend that worked at UPS with him. His name is Devin. Every time that Frank was doing good for quite a while. He had a bad relapse in December, before he passed away in May. And so.
What year is this?
This was 2022.
Okay.
Yeah.
When he passed?
Right?
Yeah.
Or yeah.
Okay.
We just
we're
we just changed to 24. Yeah, it's confusing.
Okay.
It's confusing.
So, I get mean. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing here? I'm like, kick rocks. Like every time you come around, it's bad. Are you coming to bring him drugs? He has pain pills for his surgery. He doesn't need it. Are you going to come get them? Like what? Like leave. And he's like, well, I'm just here to see my best friend. I was like, Frank, get him the fuck out of here. And I walk inside. I come back out, and he's like, Devin wants to go to rehab, and I'm just trying to tell him how to, he wants to get sober, whatever. I'm like, all right. So a while passes, and he's like, can I use your bathroom? And I was like, sure. I was like, but get out. And he's like, can we please talk? I'm like, Devin, I don't like you. I don't care for you. I don't even want you here. Goodbye. Use the bathroom and go. So I cave and end up talking with him. Frank's like, just talk to him with me. I'm like, okay. So he comes in my house and we're sitting on the couch and Frank's telling him, what are you going to do? Like your daughter does not have to see what mine have. And he said, for the first time in so long, I had heard him say, he's like, my wife is so in love with me and I'm a better husband and I'm so proud of myself. I'm a better dad and like, you don't have to do what I've done because Devin's a lot younger. And they're talking, whatever. So he ends up leaving. Like we cry together and I'm like, just go get help. Like, and his fiance, I don't know if they're still together after all of this, but I felt for her. Like I liked her. Like, her and I got along, And so he leaves. Saturday, I go to work. Frank's getting better. Sunday, he actually drove me to work that day. And took my son, Gio, to Target because Gio's birthday was the following week. And came back to the salon for a few hours. And my son and him, like I said, did baseball together. And so they were going to do this like YouTube thing. And so they started creating content and they were like going through all these cards and stuff. And they sat in the back and they did these videos with each other and my youngest one too. And he left, took the kids home. I stayed at work. And this is Sunday actually. He said, hey, what time are you going to be home? I was like, I'll be home like around 11:30 or 12. I was doing my friend's hair. And I always worked late in the salon.
Yeah.
So he's like, do you mind if I go with Devin? He wants to get a tattoo for sobriety because he's going to leave for rehab this week. And I was like, do you feel strong enough to be around him? Like, I know he's going to get help, but do you feel like you can handle him? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, like, I don't want to be your mom. Like, I want to be your wife. So if you feel strong enough, that's fine. So there was like a 30-minute window from when I was going to be home. So the kids, my oldest was, or my neighbor was next door. And so the two little ones went to sleep. I got home right after he left. And my neighbor like always checks on them. If we have like a few minutes, we have to pop out of the house. And so I come home, I'm on the couch, and he's like, mind you, Vegas is open 24 hours, so it's late. I'm like, just be home at a decent time. Like, it's midnight, come home by 3, you know? Well, at 4 o'clock rolls around, and I'm like, texting him, like, what the fuck? Like, now I'm freaking out. I haven't, like, doubted you, like, in so long. Now I'm getting nervous. And he's like, I'm on my way home. I need to stop and get gas. And he, like, sent me a picture that his light had just came on. That was the last picture that he ever sent me. And I was like, okay. So I fall asleep on the couch. And our couch is huge. And so we have these, like, 2, like, ottomans. So it's, like, almost like a full-size bed on one side. And I'm sleeping, and he comes in, and he's, like, using his walker when he came in because he started to not use it out that day. And he had a big glass of iced tea, and he spilt it because, like, the walker got stuck. And I woke up, and it was all over me in the couch. And so I was like, fuck, I'm going to go upstairs real quick and, like, whatever. And I come back downstairs, and I'm like, the couch is soaked right here. Like, I can't sleep with you here tonight. So I went upstairs. Mind you, I've been sleeping with him every single night since surgery. And he came upstairs and took his contacts out. At the time, I didn't realize if he had changed his clothes, which will tie into the story later. He goes, I just really wanted you to sleep with me tonight. And I'm like, well, the couch is wet. I can't. And he's like, okay, I love you. And gave me a kiss. And I said, I love you. I'll see you in the morning. And that was the last time I saw him alive. I got woken up the next morning by my son. He was, like, frantically waking me up. And he was like, wake up, Daddy's really cold, and he has blood coming out of his nose, and he won't wake up. And I just grabbed my phone and called 911 as I'm running down the stairs. And my little one was 5 at the time. I couldn't run to the front of the couch because he was, like, laying on his side facing the TV, so I came to the back, and I was, like, trying to wake him up. And he was freezing cold, and he was clammy. And so I just grabbed them, and I ran to my neighbor's house next door, and I just was, like, banging on their door. And I want to say this was, like, 10, 11. I don't remember the time. And I just threw my kids in the house and grabbed her by her shirt, and she's tall. She's 6'3", like, came over, and I, like, stop when she goes in the house because I'm, like, scared. Like, I know he's not there, but I don't know if he's, like, she's like, come in. They're telling me to, like, roll him over and do CPR. So we're, like, trying to roll him over, and he was already starting to kind of, like, freeze up or whatever.
Was this you said this was your neighbor or
My neighbor came to help me. They're, like, family to us.
Gotcha. So
I ran out the front door, and she came out and was like, sorry. And I just, like, collapsed. And before I knew it, like, CSI or the paramedics and the fire truck come. I'm, like, screaming to the top of my lungs. A big part of that whole thing that I'll never forget was when we were running to my neighbors, my son looked back and said, like, please tell me my best friend isn't gone. And that is something that still, like, haunts me, you know? So then the police come, the coroner, CSI, like all this stuff. This is hours, like, and finally they let me come in. I'm talking to the detectives. Like, they wouldn't let anyone in the house. At this point, there's 50 people outside of my house. Like, people were just showing up. And my oldest was with my mom at the time, which was the fucking worst person for her to be with when this happened. And I gave them his phone. I said, he has a history. He's been sober. He just had this surgery. Like, we don't know. And then the coroner was saying, like, it could have been a blood clot or, like, an aneurysm because orthopedic surgery, whatever. And then I had a feeling, but I just was, like, I think in denial. But I wanted it to be a blood clot, and I didn't want that to be, like, on his death certificate that it was an overdose or whatever. And they let me come back in. I, like, sat with him for an hour as long as they would let me. The detectives gave me back his phone, and I asked Devin, did you guys do anything? Were you on anything? Did you give him anything? No, we were sober. In his phone, you can see the timeline. He's, like, trying to get Frank to get fucked up. And Frank was like, no, like, I told you, like, what are you going to do? And you just see Frank get weaker as the texts go on. And then, hey, like, give me your Percocets. Like, I have these blue 30s, blue 30s or whatever. He's like, all right. So he says, like, the amount of pills. And I ended up finding the bag of pills 2 weeks later in the pants that he had on because I didn't remember if he had changed or not. And he gave Frankie a counterfeit pill. That was so much fentanyl in it, it could have killed multiple men. And he was a big guy. He was into the gym. He was like 5'11", like 200 pounds. And there was no way that even if I had been there in that moment, like, Narcan would have saved him because that's how much fentanyl was in there.
So this guy knew that?
Yeah, that's
He
what I was
did
gonna-
not know. But it doesn't matter.
No,
so,
No, without a doubt.
Yeah, like the laws or whatever, like if you give somebody a counterfeit pill, trade, sell, knowing or unknowingly, most states are doing second-degree murder.
That's good.
Well, and the fact that you cried with him,
He
trying to
showed
help
up-
him get into rehab,
Right.
and that you showed him some
Empathy.
faith and empathy, and you even, like, trusted Frank with him, and it's just such a slap in the face, you know.
What? So he said he was going to rehab. Was it like a before I go type of thing, or was he just straight up like?
I don't know. But so we didn't get the autopsy results back for a long time. Like, it took a while. So in the moments of, like, we saw the text messages, but in the moments we didn't know. So Devin still came to the funeral. He sat next to my son and said that he gave him nothing. Watched my kids bury him. Still knowing. Like, that takes some fucking balls.
Takes something, that's for sure.
You know, and so he's still not arrested. It's an ongoing investigation. It could take another year, but he will for sure get in trouble.
It's literally ongoing right now.
Things come around.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what a powerful experience, though. Like, just overall, I mean, there's so many different emotions and things to feel. I think I would, I can feel your pain, when you tell that. And I'm trying to wrap my mind around it because I don't think I can even imagine, I mean, and, I wonder, did you know, like, you'd hoped it was a blood clot, but did you know it was an OD before even?
Like, subconsciously, I think, yeah. Like, once I saw the messages,
That was confirmation.
Without the autopsy report, I was like,
So when did you like officially put it together to the point that like he's now being, you know, he's going to get in trouble type thing? Because he was saying that didn't happen, right?
right. So once the police got the autopsy was when
They were pretty much like, yeah. Gotcha.
I think this is obviously the worst thing that could ever happen to someone is like losing a son. But this could have been a lot worse for me because of my children. Like,
and they found those or something, you know?
You know what I mean? This is the worst thing that's happened to me. It could be worse. And so I'm grateful that my babies are healthy and we're healing. It's really hard to heal and grieve when you have to like help 3 innocent babies. Like I was so paralyzed. I lost half my career. I couldn't function. Like I was making $150,000 a year.
Yeah. How do you do
half
that?
My career, could not leave my house. I would no show my clients. Like I couldn't function at all. Like I was so skinny. My hair was falling out. Like I looked so bad. I couldn't get my kids to school. It was so hard for me. But a lot of that also plays into like the codependency. Like my breath got taken away, you know, because I was so addicted to him and making sure he was okay all the time. And now where I'm at, I'm in such a different place.
Yeah. And I'm curious about that. And one thing I want to say is, you know, Ed, what's wild as shit is that this is like, you're putting your story out there, but this is such a common thing now. You know, like there's a lot of other people that have faced this reality. You don't really hear about it on, you know, platforms like this, but, and that's just such a heartbreaking statistic. So, one, we're just proud of you for like having the courage to put it out there.
100%.
And, but I want to know, you know, so the aftermath of that, as far as you talked about like losing half your career and stuff, but you know, maybe how it affected your kids and then how you guys are healing now.
My daughter was my oldest. It didn't hit her for a long time. And she was mad. And she said, it could have been so much closer to Dad. But I felt like I always had to protect you. It wasn't like protecting me from like violence. It was like we were a team. Like she saw so much. And so she has been struggling. She's not, before, she was very emotional and would talk to me about everything. And now she's very closed off. She didn't cry forever. Like she cried in the beginning, like the first couple of weeks, like at the funeral a little bit and stuff. But she did not have a breakdown till this summer that just passed, her and I in the car. And I really worry about her because she doesn't talk. Yeah. She deals with it differently. Like me, I'm like a crier. Yeah. You know, my son, he's never going to forget that image ever. And so my oldest won't go to therapy. My middle, he was booking his own therapy appointments. Like was doing good. Now he doesn't want to go. They're doing better. I let things go for too long because I felt guilty that he wasn't around anymore. So I let them get away with everything. So trying to reel it back in has been really difficult. And, you know, my youngest, she's starting to forget him. That's hard. She's like, I forget what Daddy's laugh sounds like. So I play videos and stuff. And she has really bad separation anxiety, like cannot sleep without me. So me going away is really hard for her, like coming here, you know, because she sleeps with me every single night. Like she can't sleep alone. And so there's a lot of struggle when you're trying to help your babies heal, because I'm trying to heal and I didn't do a good job in the beginning. Like I hold a lot of guilt. Like I put them through a lot of shit because of my grief.
So you're trying to heal yourself and 3 children.
Well, we talk about this a lot in different scenarios, right? About it's like the easiest example is you guys flew here, right? It's like when you get on the plane, what do they tell you? Put your mask on first. Because if you pass out,
Now you can't help your babies.
Yeah.
Correct.
But I literally like traumatized them by me crying crazy and passing out and but I literally had no control over my body. It was so weird. So now I'm really trying to just make sure that I'm like present in the moment with them because I wasn't.
Well, the important part is you've recognized that and you've attacked it. So you might have had some time, you grieved and you were dealing with it the only way you knew. But the fact of the matter is that you're like, yeah, that's not going to work. I got to fix myself and I got to take care of my children. And so you've obviously, from hearing where you were at, you've obviously made a shit ton of progress and you're still working for it. And like, that's the most important part.
I just want to
feel
clarify.
so empowered that I can look back and say like, damn, and like I'm here and like I can talk about it. And sometimes I cry and sometimes I don't. Mm-hmm. But I was just telling Caitlin, like, people won't get this, but there is silver lining in everything. And I would do anything to have him back. Yeah. Like, I wish that he was here. But him dying made me focus on myself again because my babies needed me so bad. Yeah. And I would have never done that because I was so spiraled into just making sure he was going to stay sober. So it's like devastating, horrible. I miss him every day. But there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. You can find light in even the darkest of places. Like, I talk about that all the time wrote about this recently. I was like, no matter what the situation in life, you can take something positive from it. You just have to be willing to do so, and amor fati, the love of one's fate, everything is either good or necessary. And it's like living and knowing that things are either good or fated or meant to happen, but nothing's bad. And I know it's hard to no matter what situation you face, it's hard to well, that's pretty bad, but there's always something positive to take away from it. And I think it's pretty beautiful that you are finding yourself and haven't had that for a long time.
Yeah, it feels really good. Like, I would have never gone on a trip with my girlfriends to go heal. Like, this is healing, And one thing has pushed me so far is Isabella, my oldest, telling me, I'm so proud of you. Like, you've come so far. Like, that's cool. She used to ask me a year ago, like, when are you going to do your makeup again? I'm like, I think I forgot how. And so when my kids, are recognizing it and telling me, I'm like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. And I think that that's hard for certain people to see me moving forward. Like, with my father-in-law, he's stuck. That was his son. My sister-in-law made a comment to me, and she was coming from a good place, but, dating and moving forward, she goes, you're the only one that can really move forward with your life because my dad can't get another son, they can't get another dad, and I can't have another brother, but you can get another husband. And she goes, I'm not saying that, it doesn't make your grief or loss any less. She's like, but you have an opportunity someday to do that again. And she's right. It doesn't mean I didn't lose my husband. And I think that that's where a lot of people in our family struggle, that I'm moving forward. You don't move on from this kind of stuff. You really don't. You move forward and you take with you the memories. That's all. Yeah.
You take the lessons. And then speaking of dating, you're doing that. Are you dating or anything like that? Yeah?
I have someone.
Ish.
Okay.
I do. And you know what?
She's gonna. I know she's gonna be no comment, or she's gonna.
Yeah. First of all, being 35 and you're with one person forever, it's like, oh, fuck, this is what I'm getting thrown out to the world. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a little crazy right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say good time for that too.
Yeah. So, I got lucky.
Yeah.
With that.
Well, and like you said, you learned you're finding yourself. And so now you're able to move forward and create a life with somebody, but knowing who you are. So you're able
boundaries.
to and you're not going to depend on them. There's all these things that it's like, it's just going to be beautiful ahead, because you've gained so much. So, and it's just a pretty wild story, and I'm going to think about it, but, I am curious, and I do got to ask this, because I always ask this at the end, and we'll hit anything else that we can. But what is your relentless pursuit? And this can be both personally and professionally, or just one or the other. But what is your relentless pursuit?
I don't know. Hold on. I think I've always wondered what my purpose and all of this was, being surrounded by addicts my whole life. And I finally figured it out after I left the other podcast. I was here, and I went through all these things to help other people. Like, I really feel like my purpose is that.
I believe that too, for the
Making
record.
an impact.
Like, if this podcast hits one person, then I did my job.
I love it.
Can I ask you one too? I've been asking this lately whenever we have stories like this where people were in different scenarios. But it could just be yes or no if you want. But the woman that was passing out, anxiety, all the kind of stuff, right after it happened, do you think that version of you what do you think she'd say about you sitting here now, and do you think she'd be proud of you?
Absolutely. I wanted to not wake up in those moments. I did not want to keep living. And I had so much to live for still. So the fact that I'm sitting here and I can get on an airplane and I can go tell this, and hopefully it hits someone in a great way. Like, I am so proud of myself.
It's amazing.
Because I did not, I'm telling you, like, I was in such a hole. And then I always say, like, I started seeing, like, fireflies at the end of the tunnel, like little splats of color and light. And then it would go away. And then it would come back. And for me right now, that shit is shining bright.
Right.
Because
awesome.
I love it.
I have my 3 babies to live for. And I have got to share this story so that it changes people.
You got a whole new purpose.
Damn
It
right.
took me freaking 37 years to figure out, why the hell am I surrounded by people that have addiction? Why? This shit sucks. Like,
It's like he was saying, it was necessary. It was for a reason, because it needed to get you to here.
yeah. And so, like, that is my...
There it is.
I feel you. And I mean, it doesn't matter. You figured that out. I'd say all the time. I was almost 29 when I got my motorcycle accident. I said it took me getting run over by a car to figure out what I want to do with my life. I mean, it just comes to you in the craziest times. But is there anything you want to leave off with? Anything you got to say in closing?
Me.
Hey, thank you for being here. I mean, maybe here in a few years down the road, we'll have you back. We'll be in another studio. We'll be.
I love that.
We'll be ready to hear about your progress, your kids' progress, and all these different things. And it was an honor having you. It meant a lot.
Truly,
Thank you so
truly.
much.
You should be
This
very
was a
proud.
really good one. I was really comfortable. It was great.
That's a
Yeah.
very
we like to
high
hear.
compliment to us.
I was so
appreciate
nervous
it.
for my first one. I was literally like
Yeah.
shaking. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Honestly, too, like having her support.
Yeah.
I bet.
I'm like, I need a trip with Caitlin. She's like my soul
yeah.
sister. We don't get to hang out much, but we have so much in common. We are girls. Like, I love you. Thank you for coming.
Friends like that are the shit. And I was going to say, shout out to Caitlin for being here with you. And, I know it means the world to her, and everybody needs someone like you in their corner. So,
In fact.
all right. Hell yeah. Well, until next time.
We'll see you next time.